Well, welcome to our lecture series. We're excited to present Dr. Vladimir Morosan. I made an informal introduction at the time of the opening of our masterclass as Vlad being my personal friend and also godfather to my daughter. But now I'm going to introduce him formally because I think that speaks to the accomplishments Dr. Morosan has attained.
I'm ready.
Media too, right?
Yeah.
He's a graduate of Occidental College. I believe we worked there with Howard Swan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And at the University of Illinois, he did his doctorate there, is where we met. And as I was coming in, he was coming out. He went to Russia to do postgraduate research at the Moscow State Conservatory under the guidance of Klavdiy Ptitsa. Maybe some of you have had the chance to view that video where you had Sveshnikov, Sokolov, and Ptitsa in black and white, presenting their personalities in a stark way. It's a wonderful video clip, but he's a prominent historical figure, and I think Dr. Morosan had the unique opportunity to work under him. He also worked at the Yale Institute of Sacred Music. His book, Choral Performance in Pre-Revolutionary Russia, remains the definitive study on that subject. With the assistance of grants from the Thomas J. Watson Foundation and the William J. Fulbright Foundation, he traveled throughout Russia and Europe, amassing one of the largest collections of Russian Orthodox sacred musical scores in the world, material that he subsequently cataloged under a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. As founder and director of the Orthodox Sacred Music Reference Library, and we hope to hear more about that, he is making this material available online under the auspices of the nonprofit Russian Choral Heritage Foundation. In 1987, he established Muzika Rusika, a publishing company specializing in the publication and dissemination of Orthodox choral music throughout the Western world. As founder and artistic director of Archangel Voices, a professional choral ensemble, he has recorded 6 CDs of Orthodox liturgical music in English. He is also the composer and editor of numerous choral arrangements. He has assembled programs for and coached many prestigious professional choirs, including 3 Grammy Award winners and nominees in their performances of Russian Orthodox music. He served as project lead for online instruction in the Department of Liturgical Music of the OCA. A tonsured reader in the Orthodox Church, he currently serves as director of liturgical singing at St. Catherine Orthodox Mission in Carlsbad, California. He is also the recipient of the coveted St. Romanos Medal, awarded to outstanding figures in Orthodox music by the OCA Church, and I presume the Department of Liturgical Music. He follows in the footsteps of such individuals who also received the award as Father Sergei Glagoliev and David Drillock, and we, I think, just came up with Alexei Shapovalnikov and the recently deceased John Sutko. I congratulate you for all of those wonderful achievements, and I'm really delighted that you agreed to share your knowledge with us today. Let's welcome Dr. Vladimir Morosan, please. That's right.
Thank you.
You can see it.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that introduction. It's really a great pleasure to be here this evening and to be a contributor to this outstanding Orthodox music masterclass and to be sharing the virtual floor, as it were, with my esteemed colleagues in this lecture series, Father Ivan Moody and Fotini Downey Robinson. So welcome to all our listeners, wherever in the world or on this continent you may be. I mentioned the handout that Yelena just emailed to everybody, so I hope that you have had a chance to print it out and kind of have it handy as we survey various topics on the matter of resources. So, having begun my involvement in church music some 50 years ago in the early 1970s, I can well remember the time when a lecture on this topic would have been very brief, particularly when it came to materials in the English language. Orthodox worship in English at that time was a relatively new phenomenon. As a matter of diocesan policy, it was officially established and promulgated largely in the Antiochian Archdiocese since the mid-1930s. Elsewhere, among Slavic and Greek heritage parishes, English was regarded as something distinctly foreign and experimental, with Church Slavonic and liturgical Greek being the default. Now, if you happen to be interested in the history and development of English as a language of worship in North American Orthodoxy, I would direct your attention to two recent presentations on that topic that are available online, and they're also mentioned on your handout. The first is Language in American Orthodox Music, Liturgical and Pastoral Perspectives, and this was a panel discussion that was co-sponsored by the Orthodox Christian Studies Center of Fordham University and Capella Romana, and featured as panelists Dr. Jessica Suchipalalis of SUNY Potsdam and Dr. Vitaly Pirmякov and Father John El Masih, both of St. Vladimir's Seminary, with Alexander Lingus as host and Richard Barrett as the moderator. It's a very interesting session, and it's available for viewing. The second one was just a few weeks ago, and this was David Drillock's keynote address on the topic of unity in the church through song, which was given at the recent St. Vladimir's Summer Music Institute. And this gave a historical overview of the development of liturgical singing in North America over the last 50 to 60 years. It was an excellent, excellent presentation. And of course, it brought to everyone's attention a unique perspective that Professor Drillock, only Professor Drillock had, because he was right in the center of things in his position at St. Vladimir Seminary during that time. This last presentation really should be required viewing for all Orthodox church musicians. Back in the late 1960s and early 70s, there were just a handful of Slavic heritage parishes, chiefly in the OCA, where either the priest or the choir director were quite literally creating musical resources in English as the liturgical year progressed. Here is how Father Sergei Glagolyev, who was one of those English language mission priests at St. Innocent's Parish in Tarzana, which is a suburb of Los Angeles in Southern California, here's how he describes the process, and I quote, "A certain feast would be coming up next week, so I would sit down and compose the necessary hymns in English. In those days, it was much easier to sit down and write something than to go look for it someplace." And across town in Los Angeles, near downtown Los Angeles at Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral, the director of the English choir, John Warren, was doing pretty much the same thing. Now, this was in many ways the birth of Orthodox liturgical composition in American Orthodoxy. Of course, at that time, there was no internet, and even copy machines were a rare thing. Music publishing as a focused activity or an industry in Orthodox circles did not exist yet. So even if a parish wished to sing all or parts of a service in English, they would have to search far and wide and literally beg, borrow, or steal someone's handwritten music and run to the copy studio around the corner and get it photocopied. Now, my purpose here is not to reiterate David Drillock's historical account of the development of Orthodox music in English, but simply to put into perspective for you where we began and where we are now. Tremendous steps have been made in recent decades. At the same time, the growth and development of American Orthodox music has not been something that has proceeded according to any orderly or well thought out plan. We remember that the planting of Orthodox parishes on the North American continent began initially with the Orthodox mission to Alaska. And had it continued to develop as a primarily mission-minded endeavor, we might have witnessed a systematic process of producing English liturgical texts, coupled with musical settings of them, along with well-trained leaders of church singing who would have been equipped to teach children and adults to sing them, all proceeding in an orderly, premeditated fashion. Our ancestors in this endeavor, by the way, understood that when a priest was sent into a mission situation, he had to be accompanied by a psalmist, a psalm singer. But we, of course, know that the way that Orthodoxy developed in this country was not an orderly fashion. Very soon after the departure in 1907 of Archbishop Tikhon, now Saint Tikhon, Patriarch of Moscow, under whom all the Orthodox parishes in North America were essentially united administratively, Orthodoxy in America splintered into a patchwork of ethnically oriented parishes and dioceses, driven largely by immigration of various nationalities to this continent, whose focus was first and foremost on the survival and present self-preservation of ethnic identity, language, and culture, of which the Orthodox faith was but one aspect and not necessarily the primary one. In many such parishes, church attendance was centered upon the Sunday Divine Liturgy, while the other services of the daily cycle, such as Vespers and Matins, Orthros, and the services of various feasts and saints, being relegated to a distinctly secondary position of importance. The Sunday liturgy itself was regarded, to use Father Sergei Glogoliev's words, as, quote, some kind of proscenium event where we all sit or stand and watch something that's happening, rather than something in which all are actively involved in the living Christ, all leading to the Eucharist, which fulfills our life with the knowledge of truth in this world and life everlasting in the world to come by God's grace. End quote. Faithful people who have this experience of Orthodox worship are then called upon to go into the world and make disciples of all nations, being inspired and nurtured by the worship they had just taken part in. This, my friends and colleagues, is the framework within which I would like to continue our examination of liturgical music resources, with a view of developing some criteria by which we can discern what is relevant to us in our work as Orthodox church musicians in 21st century North America. If our primary role and function is to create an effective and engaging proscenium event every Sunday, and on a few other select occasions, such as Christmas, Holy Friday, and Pascha, we would have one set of criteria for what is relevant. But if we see the possibility and respond to the missionary mandate bequeathed to us by our Lord Jesus Christ himself, through the apostles, through the saints of all the ages, and especially our North American saints, then we will have a substantially different set of criteria. I want to begin our examination of these criteria by stating, or rather restating, something that may seem rather obvious. The Holy Orthodox Church worships by means of words, lots of them, combined with pleasing melody. This principle is well articulated by many church fathers, among them St. Basil the Great, St. John Chrysostom, and I will not take the time to repeat those sayings of the fathers. But let it be said that this vast quantity of words, organized in various cycles of the liturgical year and musically organized according to categories of melodies known as the 8 tones, has one overarching purpose: to serve as the vehicle and the means for rational worship, the logiki, latria, or sloviesnaya sluzhba, or in the words of the Divine Liturgy itself, the sacrifice of praise by all the believers. The words are intended to engage the worshipers, which is why they are combined with a musical element. Different at various times, historically and in different cultures, but universally chanted or sung by soloists, by choirs, and or by entire congregations throughout the history of the church. And being thus elevated by means of the musical element, higher, mind you, than ordinary spoken speech, this multitude of hymns, known as stihira, troparia, kontakia, canons, exapostolaria, etc., they do a multitude of things. They offer praise and supplication to God. They teach us theology, relating the dogmas of the Holy Trinity, as we just heard this past Sunday, dogmas of the Incarnation, dogmas about the Theotokos. They teach us church history, relating and interpreting various events spoken of in the Gospels. They teach us about the saints, the heroes of our faith. They exhort us and call us to repentance, teaching us how to live in our relationship with God and our neighbor, how to treat one another, all with the ultimate purpose of bringing us to salvation, into that union with God that mankind had in paradise and which was broken by the fall of Adam and Eve. These hymns are a complete Sunday school curriculum. As the faithful sing and listen to these hymns week after week, year after year, our minds are gradually shaped to conform to the mind of the church, the body of Christ. If these words are to engage both those who sing them and those who hear them, it goes without saying that they must be, to use Archbishop Thomas Cranmer's famous phrase dating back to the first Anglican Book of Common Prayer of 1549, they should be in a tongue understanded of the people. It is somewhat astonishing that to this day, there are Orthodox churches in this country where the liturgical language wars continue to be waged. And this is really a topic for another day, but I just want to make that observation that in the history of the church and to this day, there have been many generations of worshipers who have experienced liturgical worship in a language they do not fully understand. And as a result of this, various types of compensatory coping behaviors and aesthetic props have arisen, including those within the realm of liturgical music, which, though pious and well-intentioned, are out of sync with the fundamental design and the intent of public liturgical worship in the Orthodox Church. But assuming that the Orthodox language of worship is English, it now becomes our task to ensure that it is the best English, that it is understandable English, not merely a string of English words that make no sense, and that whoever is delivering the English during worship, be it the choir or the chanter, is doing so in a way that makes them comprehensible and meaningful. Moreover, the singing must be in some essential way able to engage and edify the listener by its musical content, its beauty, if you will, and the manner in which that musical content is delivered. This in turn means that the musical setting selected must be appropriate to the abilities of the performing forces, and that they, the singers, are able to render them successfully. The task of making these choices will bring us squarely to the topic of resources. But before we go there, let me just share with you a few thoughts about how we can evaluate the success and appropriateness of our singing in church. As church singers, we can regard our singing as successful when the singing creates an atmosphere of conducive to liturgical prayer, when the mechanics of the singing are done decently and in order, as St. Paul admonishes us, when there are no distractions or disruptions originating from the choir, and they can be musical distractions, they can be delays, false starts, wrong notes, things that even the most unmusical person in the congregation will notice something happened. They might be behavioral distractions, talking, commotion, excessive movement on the kleros in the choir that's visible or audible to the congregation, discordant, uncoordinated, out of tune singing, so that even the most musically unsophisticated person will notice that something is awry. And oftentimes, this is the result of musical selections that are not appropriate to the abilities of the singers. This was mentioned in one of the earlier sessions. So a few other thoughts on how do we judge appropriate music for a liturgical occasion? Well, is the character of the music in agreement with or reflective of the text and the general prayerful content of the service? Is the music of a level of complexity or difficulty that is appropriate for the voices singing it? Is the melody clearly heard? And which voice carries the melody? Are there other parts working effectively with the melody in order to produce harmonious and pleasant sounding results? Are the voices well balanced? Are the words being pronounced clearly and together? We must bear in mind that as church singers, our purpose is to deliver the liturgical text to the ears, minds, and hearts of the worshipers. Only in this way will the beneficial meaning of the text be conveyed. For those changeable texts such as Stihira and other daily feast day propers that are sung just once a year, we might adopt a certain hierarchy, a practical hierarchy in our approach. They can be sung by the full choir, but only if the choir knows the tones and can sing the hymns clearly and without mistakes. This is preferably gone over during choir rehearsal or warm-up just prior to the service. If that's not possible, then it's better that a small select group of singers, those who know the tones and can sing the text without mistakes, render those hymns. If that's not possible, it's better even to have it sung by a single singer, as long as the text is delivered loudly, clearly, and using the proper melodic part. If all else fails, then they should be read by the reader loudly and clearly. But this would be a kind of last resort, because those parts are clearly assigned. If they're assigned a tone, they're intended to be sung. Now, I've taken the time to mention some of these considerations, which seemingly have no direct bearing on the topic of resources, because I want to encourage you to have these various criteria in the back of your minds when we spend the rest of our time in this presentation actually discussing some of the material that is available, most of it quite readily available online, and how that material can be relevant to the important missionary component of the church singing ministry. We might begin our discussion of resources with one very obvious source, and that is very close to home to this master class. This is the excellent and comprehensive listing of resources that appears, that is offered by the Society of St. Romanos. And here you have the website. And if you go down, there are interviews and with leading musicians. There are all kinds of calendar events that are coming up, upcoming events, announcements, and scholarly publications. And then we get to liturgical singing resources. So this is a relatively new publication online that has begun, I think, since the beginning of 2021. But I call it to your attention, lest it be a bushel under a basket. And I'm sure that we will have some things to add to these resources. But we'll take a closer look at some of the listings offered here and see if we can break them down by category and expand upon them further. Now, as you know, we can broadly classify all liturgical music sung throughout the liturgical year into two categories. There are the fixed, unchanging hymns of Divine Liturgy, Vespers, and Matins, as well as such services as the Liturgy of the Presanctified, and those we call, using commonly used terminology in musicology, as the hymns of the ordinary hymns. And then we have the hymns that change with each of several liturgical cycles, chief among them the weekly resurrectional cycle governed by the 8 tones, or the Octoichos. We have the daily cycle of the days of the week. We have the yearly cycle containing commemorations for every day of the year, known as the Menaion, and the movable Paschal cycle, preceded by the Lenten Triodion and followed by the Flowery Triodion or Pentecostarian. And these are called the proper hymns, hymns that change with every day depending on the combination of cycles. I think it would be fair to say that over the years, or over the centuries, one might say, composers of liturgical music have focused their attention largely upon the hymns of the ordinary, and among those, chiefly on the unchanging hymns of the Divine Liturgy. But one might reasonably ask, how many different settings of the cherubic hymn or the Eucharistic anaphora, a mercy of peace, does a church choir need? But it is important to have musical settings that are appropriate to the available performing forces. And we'll return to this topic a bit later. But right now, I'd like to focus our attention upon those resources that are available for singing the liturgical propers, those content-filled, changeable hymns that make up the overwhelmingly large proportion of what is sung in Orthodox services. The first and most obvious category of resources has to do with the liturgical texts themselves, as well as the order of the services. And in this regard, a good deal of progress has been made in the last few years by the various diocesan departments of liturgics and music. For every weekend and major feast and saints of the Polyeleos rank, one can find liturgical texts online. But there are some interesting variations and peculiarities here. The Antiochian Archdiocese offers many texts in bilingual English and Arabic, as well as in English only. Here on the website of the Antiochian Archdiocese. So here today we have the Nativity of the Forerunner and John the Baptist, a new calendar. And so over here you have the texts for the Festal Orthros and Divine Liturgy variables. Everything is presented in order. The texts are complete. In other words, they don't require the knowledge of liturgical books or how to assemble a service from different books. Everything is in order with the changeable hymns interspersed between the unchangeable hymns, but the texts themselves are in many cases drawn from the divine prayers and services first published in 1938 by Father Seraphim Nasser, whose first language was not English. The Department of Liturgical Music and Translations of the Orthodox Church in America also offers texts. If you go to the section under liturgical music and texts, you will find texts for liturgical services. And here you go, again, today being June 24th, you have a version in you, your, a version in thou, thy. And this has been offered for about 15 years now. The texts are pointed for the common tones of Russian imperial chant, also known as the obichod, which simply means commonly used. But here's the peculiarity. Only texts for Vespers and liturgy are offered, no matins. One might get the impression that matins as a service doesn't exist in the OCA, but that's certainly not the case. There are many parishes that do serve matins, but that remains a resource that still is under construction. Not too long ago, the Department of Music also began posting detailed rubrics for every major service, again, for the weekends and major feasts. This section here. The other dioceses, for example, Rokor, the Greek Archdiocese, also have various resources online on their diocesan websites, but these offerings are not nearly as robust as those of the Antiochians and the OCA, and perhaps reflecting the fact that these two jurisdictions have had the longest track record of divine services in English. Even so, some 50 or to 80 years after the various hierarchs committed to serving in English, there is as yet no complete set of service books in English, no agreement to the style of language that should be used for worship. The Antiochians use hieratic language, which some call not quite accurately Elizabethan English, with the thou, thy pronouns. The Greeks use you, your. The OCA, as you just saw, uses both, with some dioceses favoring one style and others the other style. Now, there are also a great many liturgical translations were done by the late Archimandrite Ephraim Lash, who many regarded as one of the preeminent English translators of our time. Since his departure from this life a few years ago, his translations are archived at newbiz.org, which you have in your list of resources. The above mentioned resources are online, but there are other resources available. And in this regard, Rokor is the only jurisdiction that to date has produced a complete Manaean, 12 volumes containing the propers for the services of every day. This gargantuan feat was accomplished largely by the late brother Joseph Isaac Lambertson, and is published in 12 handsome hardbound volumes by St. John of Kronstadt Press. The entire set of 12 can be purchased for $1,179, special discount price if you get the entire set. We don't have time here to get into the question of quality and style of translation, but let me just say that having worked for over 15 years editing the texts that are posted online every week by the OCA Department of Music, I have, quote, seen it all. And quite honestly, many of the texts currently out there leave a lot to be desired in terms of clarity, in terms of accuracy of meaning, syntax, choice of vocabulary, and other factors that make the difference between a translation that is elegant, understandable, and engages the listener, and a translation that is composed of words that are English, but whose meaning is difficult to grasp. There is still much work to be done along those lines. There are two other online text resources I'd like to mention. And the first is this, is one of my favorite sites. It's called the Dynamic Orologian. And this is quite an amazing site. It has, in terms of its flexibility and the fact of how dynamic it is. I won't take the time to explore this at length because we're running a little bit late. But you have to really spend some time here in order to appreciate what it's offering. It offers on the fly, hence the term dynamic, any daily service of any day at any given time of day with all the texts, changeable, unchangeable, thus offering anyone a complete daily prayer rule. You know, it's like the Lord said, if they did not know, they would have no guilt, but they know. So we have no excuse for not praying, having a resource like this. And also mentioned along these lines is the Ponemar project. And there's a page there for Orthodox liturgical books in English. This is archived or curated by Alexander Andreev, who many of you know from, I think, the Chicago area. But he's now teaching in St. Petersburg at the St. Petersburg Theological Academy. So, but if you're looking for an English liturgical text online, you're likely to find it here. And again, you can kind of, as I scroll through, it has all kinds of resources here. Now, when it comes to musical settings, and by this I mean resources with musical notation, again, the music departments have made and continue to make major strides in terms of making material available in English. Now, for some time, the OCA music department has been offering music downloads. And here you will find a whole section of different departments, services of the yearly cycle, major feasts, extraordinary services from the Book of Needs, services in the 8 tones. And all of this is set to a number of different chant settings, most common being the common chant, the Imperial Chapel, Russian Imperial Chapel chant, or adaptation of it, but also some alternatives, abbreviated Greek, Kiev and Caves Monastery, various model melodies, podobne, which, by the way, I want to put in a plug for model melodies. When sung well, they can truly augment the festal nature of an occasion. It's not surprising that they were kind of developed for that purpose. It's a special way of saying, listen up, everybody, something unusual and extraordinary is happening. So pay attention. In addition to Slavic settings for SATB choir, many days and feasts on the OCA website have Serbian chant settings for melody and ison, This is the work of Peter Drobatz, as well as some Byzantine chant settings, the work of Kevin Lawrence. We've already mentioned that the OCA Department of Music regularly posts texts for Stihira and at Vespers that are pointed for common Russian imperial chant. And this is great if your singers are familiar with the tones and the system of pointing. But what if your singers are recent converts and don't know the tones? What if every time you switch from tone 1 to tone 4 to tone 5, you have a crash and burn on the kliros? Well, for those people, I'd like to recommend this resource that's hidden away on the website of St. John of Chicago Orthodox Church in Rogers, Arkansas. Here you have, just imagine that behind every single one of these buttons, there is a wealth of material. So if we are looking again for June 24th, well, I hope their site isn't down. There it was. It goes to a Dropbox. So here you have PDF files, literally for nearly every single day of the year. And those texts are set. Here we have Nativity of John the Forerunner. Well, I must have clicked on June 14th. But okay, so let's say you had to sing a service. Your bishop decided to drop in unannounced, and you have to sing a service to St. Methodius, Patriarch of Constantinople. Here you have it, set to music. And that way, if your choir doesn't sing from pointed text, you have it here. You might say some of the text settings could stand to be adjusted. Some of the layouts could be a little bit better. But all in all, for choirs who need music in front of them, this is an invaluable resource. Just a few months ago, our friends at St. Tikhon's Monastery and Seminary launched St. Tikhon's Music Resource. It's a first of its kind musical resource. Here is a portion of that website. And again, there's a lot here. I urge you to go there and explore. It's very actively being developed, but this is the first attempt, or nearly the first attempt, to offer carefully selected, professionally edited, well-typeset liturgical music in English. And as such, it's not totally free. There are some free offerings, but others require a nominal payment for a bundle of 5 downloads, or a yearly subscription, which unlocks most or all of the content. Benedict Sheehan, who many of you know, in recent years has become increasingly recognized as an Orthodox composer. He's finalist for the American Prize this year in the category of both composition and conducting. Benedict, together with Abbot Sergius at St. Tikhon's, has assembled a top-notch musical team, and they are creating the content for this website and managing it. And at present, there are 695 titles on this website, and new ones are being added constantly. A lot of the content of St. Tikhon's music.com is based on the Divine Liturgy and Great Vespers, recently published by St. Tikhon's, which are modeled after that famous anthology known as the Sputnik Psalomshchika, the Chanter's Companion, published in Russia in the early 20th century. This liturgy, and I thought I had a copy of it to hold up, but I guess I don't. this liturgy volume contains all the hymns, both unchanging and changing, needed to sing a divine liturgy throughout the year in a typical parish environment. So unless you're in a monastery that has daily services, you will find what you need in the divine liturgy. The melodies have been also selected to be largely harmonizable. That is, they can be sung by a single singer or by a few singers in unison, but if the performing voices allow for it, they can be harmonized in various ways. And the book contains detailed instructions on how to do that. About half a year ago, Great Vespers was published in the same manner, and Matins is currently in preparation. So one can only admire both the vision and the high quality execution of this project. Since we mentioned the Sputnik Psalomshchika, this would be an appropriate time to mention another project that this anthology inspired, and that is the St. Romanos the Melodist Society and its Church Singers Companion. This is not to be confused with the Society of St. Romanos, which is hosting this masterclass. They are the other St. Romanos. This project was initiated some years ago by Father George Johnson of Brocourt and his wife Matushka Deborah. It now numbers 6 volumes, as you can see here: Vespers, Matins, Liturgy, the Fixed Cycle, the Paschal Cycle, and Book of Needs. It contains hundreds and hundreds of hymns with texts that are well set to music, that are very legibly typeset according to the highest standards. The music is in 4 parts, but like the music from St. Tikhon's music resource, most of the pieces have a clear hierarchy of parts and thus can be reduced to a smaller number of parts if need be. And all these pieces are downloadable individually in PDF form. As you can see, in the realm of Slavic style choral arrangements, tremendous strides have been made and continue to be made in the realm of resources that allow for a much more full cycle of services to be sung. Standing somewhere between the choral and chant tradition is the practice of the Serbian Orthodox Church. We've already mentioned the work of Peter Drobac, which is available on the OCA website, but a much more complete resource of Serbian chant in English can be found on the website of the Serbian Orthodox Church of North and South America, and even more comprehensively, the website of Nikola Razanovic. Nikola Razanovic, who is a longtime professor of theory and composition at University of Akron, he's done an absolutely yeoman's labor in adapting Serbian chant melodies into English. And he has them both in unison and arranged for 4-part choir, makes them available in PDF format, and in many cases with audio files, mostly MIDI files, but actually some other files that are sung by voices. And particularly noteworthy are there's a liturgy. Where is that? The liturgy for both for 2 parts and for 4 parts. Well, I think I clicked on the wrong page, but again, this is a website that you must spend a lot of time at, particularly to fully appreciate what the offerings are here. The other beautiful thing about Serbian chant is that if you're trying to teach your choir or your children how to sight read, this is an absolute goldmine of melodies that do more than just simply sit on 1 or 2 notes, as some of the common Slavic Russian style chant goes. So I highly recommend that you spend some time exploring Nikola Razanovic's offerings. The Antiochian Archdiocese, from the very time its first parishes were established in North America, still during St. Tikhon's tenure as an archbishop in North America, has had a dual tradition of liturgical singing, one that includes both Russian-style choral music and Byzantine chant, sometimes in regional variants that are Lebanese or Palestinian. Again, one can spend a lot of time exploring the sacred music site of the Antiochian Archdiocese. There's a large assortment there of both 19th century Russian standards that have been adapted into English by various choir masters over the years, and also lots and lots of Byzantine chant that are more recently has been added. The music library is a bit idiosyncratic and a little difficult, tricky to navigate, but certainly contains a lot of material that are useful for feast and saint day propers, and also for learning melodies, how to sing melodies. We have, in the realm of Byzantine chant also, we have the wealth of resources offered by St. Anthony's Monastery's Divine Liturgy Project. Again, this is a huge resource of material in English. And as you can see here in the Manaean, they have nearly daily offerings of the Troparian and Kontakion, that in Western notation. There's also some of the material is in Byzantine notation if you read that. And it's also carries on with a tradition of making church music look beautiful. And they have these ornamental headers and things. So here it is for the feast on the new calendar today of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. But here you don't yet have Stihira, just the Troparia and the Kontakia for the days of the year. For the Stihira, one must go to the Ages Initiative, the digital chant stand, as it's called. If you wondered I wondered, what does Ages stand for? It stands for Auto-Generated Ecclesiastical Services. And when you go to their website, you kind of need to know where to click. It took me a little while to clicking before I finally landed on this page. And I looked, and here I chose the month of June. So again, for today's date, the 24th, we click and we get the midnight office, we get matins, we get divine liturgy, we get vespers of the evening preceding. So here, for example, if we were to click, we will get, again, a listing of all the propers for the feast. We can look at Byzantine notation. To view a Byzantine notation score, click here. To view a Western notation score, click here, with several different offerings, because there isn't one, there are several sources that have been feeding into producing Byzantine chant for the Greek Archdiocese. And here you have the score, and you can also listen to Father Seraphim Dides in most cases. This is the old version.
You made the fishermen all wise by sending down upon
the old version.
The Holy Spirit. And through them you drew the world into your net. O lover of mankind, glory to you.
I didn't know if you could hear that. Maybe I didn't share my audio. But just imagine what kind of a teaching device this is, where you can, did you hear that? Yes or no?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Just imagine what a resource that is for someone learning to read music. You have the score in front of you and you have somebody singing it, and you've got a very large assortment of melodies throughout the year. The vision and design of this website is really quite something. And there are other musical settings from Stan and Nancy Takis, from Capella Romana. All those are listed on your handout. Before we leave the realm of chant, I want to mention two resources for the Carpatho-Russian tradition, and these are also listed there. In particular, I wanted to single out the Metropolitan Cantor Institute, which is Byzantine Catholic, but it has an incredible, just a sheet music archive alone is a vast storehouse of melodic material, and a lot of the educational material that they offer on the site can also serve as a model for us all, for all traditions, regardless of ethnic and jurisdictional boundaries. Now, I realize that it's 5 o'clock, and though we have a social hour with the is there a chance that we could?
Yes, we can. Sorry, we're having some technical issues here in Chicago.
Okay.
We can continue if everybody's interested in continuing, and but if you're interested in continuing, we can certainly continue.
Well, I am interested in finishing up with kind of my
We can't hear
survey.
you.
Okay. Am I muted?
Did you mute me?
Unmute. It says unmute.
Okay, we can hear you.
Unmute.
I can hear you.
David, turn yours on.
Hello? I'm getting feedback from someone like from.
Everyone needs to mute
It's
to
not muted.
prevent the feedback.
Turn mine off.
No. Okay. Okay, we're good now. That was us in Chicago, and I sincerely apologize.
Okay, as long as it wasn't in California.
Nope.
So when we're looking for the unchangeable hymns of liturgy and other services such as Vespers and Matins, for settings in English, we can visit the websites of our individual composers, several of whom are here. James Chater, and I've listed out J.H. Hendricks. These are resources that were listed in part on the Society of St. Romanos resource, but there were several that were not listed, and so I've augmented the list. Roman Herko, a composer known and loved by many of us, has a liturgy in English and several individual works. Father Ivan, your works are not listed on that resource, but here there's another resource on Mapamundi, but I don't know if there is some other source for your liturgical works. Perhaps you can tell us about that when you get a chance. Kurt Sander has his website with some of his scores. Benedict Sheehan has through the Artifact Institute, and Nazo Zakak has lots and lots of scores, 99% of which are in English. There are other resources. Musica Rusica, although it's called Musica Rusica, has about 140 individual titles of liturgical music, all of which can be seen on this particular link here. And what I wanted to mention in particular is just recently published a collection of Paschal hymns, Great and Holy Pascha, which has 450 pages and 82 titles, lots of resources. When we talk about resources, for different voicings and different levels of difficulty. Some of the other sites that contain lots of music that can be sung in English, Orthodox Church Music, which is a site maintained by Carol Surgant. These are Rokor translations. Then there's Podobin.org, which has a very large collection of scores. Not all of them are even in quality and accuracy. Some of the attributions aren't entirely accurate. Not all English settings are convenient to sing. And then we've already mentioned the St. Romanos, the Melodist Society. Not only do they have the changeable hymns, but also hymns of liturgy, hymns of vespers, matins, etc. We have Seraphim 6, which is a site that essentially took over for Psalm Music Press. They have over 300 titles of music, including the, right here you see the works, selected Orthodox musical works of Father Sergei Glagoliev. This is a volume that I realize that it's kind of a generation has already grown up since this was published in 2002. But since this again is kind of a collection that really belongs in every single Orthodox choir director's library, especially if you're singing in English. And there's the recording that goes with it, also available from Psalm Music Press, aka Seraphim 6. Here you can see the table of contents in Father Sergei's works, hymns from Vespers, Matins, hymns from liturgy, hymns from the Lenten Triodian, litanies and responses. I should say, by the way, that Peter Yermachov, our esteemed leader of this workshop, had a leading role in editing and preparing all of this material for publication. There is still quite a lot of music by Father Sergei for various feasts that bears publication, and including an early liturgy that was just recently unearthed. And hopefully this publication will take place in the not too distant future. I'd like to say a few words about Church Slavonic. There is a lot of material available in Church Slavonic, and we could spend an entire session surveying it, but we only have a time to make a few general comments. I thought it would be interesting to mention some living composers right now who are writing compositions and chant arrangements, many of them for other than the standard customary complement of mixed choir SATB. And so I've listed some of these on the handout. A lot of these require their pages on VKontakte, which is the Russian equivalent of Facebook. You may need to sign up for an account, and VKontakte is not the most user-friendly social media network to use. They're obviously always asking you to authenticate yourself, identify yourself, this and that. But if you
Oh, the VK
are willing, willing to negotiate all those hurdles, it's well worth it. So you have here some composers, Matushka Yelenia Denisova, Andrei Dmitriev, Higumen Silovan Tumanov, Nikita Voronin, just to mention a few, who are writing 2- and 3-part music of a very kind of interesting and original character. And then, of course, you have the usual sites that have been around for a while, Kliros, Ikliros, and the other ones that I've listed out there. These sites have a vast amount of material, but they're not always accurate. They're not always well typeset. The music's not always properly attributed. Many links are obsolete and don't work. So if you happen to find a piece adapted on one of these sites by a well-known composer and you want to check it out and see how accurate it is against the original first edition, the place to go is the Orthodox Sacred Music Reference Library, which about this time of year is 1 year old. We launched it last year at the ISOCM meeting officially. So again, I invite you to visit here. It's about 3,300 titles and counting, numbering over 16,000 pages. And eventually we hope to include music from other Orthodox nationalities. And we're also beginning to include some music by living composers. We just added some works by Boris Feoktistov, who is an immensely prolific composer, 80 years old this year, who has written music for different voices, different types of choirs. And we will be offering his music on this website. If you're looking for chant books and scans of original treatises in Russian, you go to ecmri.fi, which is a site maintained by Jopi Hari, I believe. And finally, it's important that we mention some instructional resources that are available. After all, if we don't have materials to teach our children, to teach our adults, then a lot of this discussion about all the available music resources becomes irrelevant. And we've already mentioned that some sites have an interactive element, Digital Chant Stand, Nikola Rizanovich, and others. But in particular, there are some websites that deserve mention, some of these instructional materials. One of the best kept secrets on the OCA website is the tutorial for learning the tones. This, again, comes with a very detailed written explanation and recordings. There are recordings in unison, recordings of all 4 parts, and then with soprano forward, alto forward, tenor forward, bass forward, so that you can sing along and learn these tones. A similar set of instructions with a little less detailed, but with very nice recordings that are placed there for the express purpose of showing how to sing unmetered chant in English, is offered by the St. Romanos.org. They're teaching recordings, and I invite you to take a little while and listen to those recordings. They're very simple, but they're very well done and definitely worthy of emulation. Those 2 resources are free, but require a certain amount of disciplined self-study. Other offerings are available for a cost, which is perfectly understandable. We tend to pay for those things we find valuable. So you have the Tone Tutor, for example, which is a set of 10 CDs that give lessons on the Slavic tones, Stihira and Traparia tones. If you want to learn Byzantine chanting, not only the theory, but also the practice, of the Saltic art, Saltiki. You have the Trisagian school of Byzantine music, and I'm sure that there are many other offerings, but this is one recent effort that deserves attention. Artifact Institute and Patram Institute offer online classes. And of course, as you know, the Society of St. Romanos and Maestro Yermachov also offer instruction in conducting. And the OCA Department of Liturgical Music that I'm involved in has offered and will continue offering courses on basic sight singing and ear training, as well as beginning conducting technique. So these are all very good and positive developments. Are they enough? Are they adequate? Well, I would say not quite yet. But they do show that there are lots of good initiatives, many of them created by young and energetic people. And so now we can gradually begin to form a vision whereby by mustering the available resources, we can begin to attain what I would call a no excuses standard of excellence for singing in the Orthodox Church. And thus envision a time when the ministry of church singers will begin to fulfill its dual high calling. On the one hand, to offer praise to God to the absolute best of our earthly abilities, and on the other hand, to engage anyone who would walk in through the doors of an Orthodox church by means of beautiful, comprehensible, and compelling liturgical services, so that when they step foot inside that church, they would not know if they are on earth or in heaven. Let me hear you say amen to that.
Amen.
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 Well, thank you. I have gone way over my time, and I also had the poor planning of scheduling a choir, not only a choir practice, but actually a choir recording session tonight with my church choirs. So I have just a few minutes. I have about 10 minutes. I'd be happy to field any questions or comments, and I hope to speak to many of you tomorrow at the social hour. But today I'm going to have to duck out in quick order. Father Ivan, you had your hand up, I saw.
Yeah, thank you, Vlad, so very much for this talk. I have three very brief points to make. One is that the list of links you put on my website is no longer active. I haven't updated it for years, and I saw that it was still visible. And while you were talking, I actually deleted the whole lot from my website. This was something I did years ago when it was necessary, and I haven't been able to keep it up, so forget that. Second thing, you talked about Serbian chant, and I wanted to make the point that this has to do with the Byzantine skeleton, so to speak, behind Serbian chant, which did not undergo the same kind of reduction that the Russian chant systems unfortunately did, so that the Znameni chants were truncated, as you know so well. So there's a kind of continuity, even though it was oral and even though the chants changed, there's a melodic flow that continues over the centuries in Serbian chant. The third thing I want to say, and this is very quick, is just to recommend to you, it's called Orthodox two-part music.org, because several people have spoken here about the need for music for reduced resources. Two-part orthodoxmusic.org is an amazing resource. It's all in English, and they have some wonderful things there. Thank you very much. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes,
It's gone 1 o'clock in the morning here.
Yes, and by the way, on that topic, that last thing you mentioned, Orthodox two-part music, it is gradually being absorbed into St. Tikhon's music resource. All the material is being given a fine-tooth combing through, edited, and will come up, but Abbot Sergius decided to leave it still active, so it's still active.
Fantastic.
But, yes,
Excellent
it is an excellent resource. Yes, Kurt has his hand up.
Yes, I wanted to add to your list of things to do, because I know you're not working hard enough. A typesetting manual for Orthodox choral music, because I know that when you look at out there, there's so many diversions in terms of what how we typeset our music, and even you and I have talked about certain conventions. So I'll let you go ahead and.
I can respond to that very briefly. That very topic came up during St. Vladimir's Summer Institute a few weeks ago, and Father Gregory Ely, whom many of you know, volunteered to make such a thing happen, because he gave a presentation at the Institute, and so we're just kind of awaiting the green light to green light it, and that such a thing will happen with templates, instructions, et cetera, for finale and possibly for some other music platforms.
Excellent news.
Well, yes. Any other questions, comments?
James had his hand raised.
Yes, James. Unmute yourself.
I apologize for being in the dark. It's 2 o'clock in the morning here. I just wanted to make a similar point to Father Ivan, that my site is also very out of date. There's some good stuff on there, but it's not really representative of what I'm doing now. I've got lots more stuff, so if anyone's interested, for the time being, they'll just have to apply to me personally if they can't find what they're looking for on my site. Thank you. And thank you for a very useful paper. Very useful indeed. Thank you.
Well, with that, my friends, I must leave you. We're doing a little project, just to let you know. Some of our homeschooling parents have asked for recordings of the 12 major feasts, the Tropari of the 12 major feasts, so that they can learn them with their kids. And so that's what we are off to do with our church choir tonight and next week. And we'll have hopefully get all this done in the next 2 weeks. So then you'll be able to go to St. Catherine Orthodox Church and find these recordings somewhere. It was a pleasure to see all of you, and I hope to talk to you tomorrow at the social hour and during the sessions as well.